Eurekas and inspirations. At first glance, a simple mechanic, providing extra progress on techs and civics whenever you complete a specific objective. However, the meta that has evolved around achieving these little objectives in competitive Civ 6 is far from simple, as the top Civ players in the world have spent years optimizing their build orders with the goal of achieving the research soft cap of 1 tech per turn from the mid-game onwards. When you're blazing through the tech tree at such a fast pace, Eurekas become essential, and activating as many of them as possible becomes a serious challenge. Strap in, because in today's video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the meta that's evolved around hitting Eurekas and inspirations in multiplayer Civ 6 with a better balanced game mod. First off, as the phrase Eurekas and inspirations is a bit of a mouthful, we'll just use the term Eureka from now on to refer to the boosts for both techs and civics. In general, triggering one of these provides 40% progress towards its respective tech or civic. This means that, in the best case scenario where we boost everything, we're only paying 60% of the cost of technologies compared to the worst case scenario where we boost nothing. This is even stronger than it first appears. Mathematically speaking, a 40% discount on techs is equivalent to a 66% increase in our effective science. This hidden value from Eurekas is a large part of the reason why top players don't blindly trust the science numbers at the top of the screen to determine who's in the lead. Rather, you have to open the science victory panel on the right and check the number of techs everyone has completed if you want the full picture. Before continuing, let's clear up some common misconceptions about how Eurekas work. First off, triggering the Eureka for a technology that we could complete in 1 turn, even without the Eureka, does matter, thanks to a concept known as science overflow. Essentially, whenever we complete a technology, any excess science we generated that turn beyond what was needed to complete the tech is stored in a little bank known as science overflow. This process can repeat itself, and our science overflow can stack infinitely. Whenever we go to research a tech that costs more than we generate in science per turn, any science overflow we have will automatically be spent on that technology. It's through this method, alternating between cheap technologies to bank up science overflow and expensive technologies to spend it, that we're able to finish every tech in 1 turn, even when some of them cost more science than we're generating on a per turn basis. Triggering the Eureka for a technology essentially reduces the cost of that technology, meaning that, even if we could finish that tech in 1 turn either way, we'll bank up more science overflow if we have the Eureka than if we don't. None of the value of that Eureka is lost. However, that doesn't mean we always get the full value from a Eureka. If, for instance, we complete 70% of a technology and then trigger the Eureka, said Eureka will only provide as much science as is needed to complete the tech, meaning that some of the value is being lost. Therefore, it's often best to delay researching a technology or civic for a turn or two, if doing so will let us get more value out of its Eureka. Lastly, Eurekas can give more value than just 40% of the cost for a technology. This can happen in 2 ways. Firstly, the Golden Age dedications Pen, Brush, and Voice and Free Inquiry provide extra progress on inspirations and Eurekas respectively, which is an often overlooked and very powerful aspect of these dedications. Secondly, there's a mechanic in Civ 6 whereby technologies and civics from a game era beyond the current one have their costs increased by 20%. This is a flat amount and doesn't stack, regardless of if a tech is from 1 era into the future or 3 eras into the future, it'll still only cost 20% more. The game era being referred to here is the same one that dictates our Golden Age dedications. For instance, in this game we were able to trigger the Eureka for the military engineering technology in the classical era, where it cost 205 science, giving us 40% of the cost of the tech, which is equal to 82 science. When the era rolls over and the tech has its cost reduced, we now have 82 out of the 170 science required to complete the tech. This Eureka gave us more than 40% of the cost of the technology. Okay, so that about sums up the more obscure Eureka mechanics. Now, let's look into the actual meta that's evolved around boosting techs. While it'd be nice to trigger every single boost in the game, we also have to strike a balance between chasing Eurekas and developing our empire efficiently, especially early on in the game. Early on, there are some techs and a lot of civics that we'll just have to suck it up in hard tech if the conditions to boost them aren't readily available. Some Eurekas are easy. Those of writing, currency, celestial navigation, and early empire, for instance. We should basically get these every single game without fail. However, many of them are left to chance. For instance, foreign trade and political philosophy have Eurekas that are based around getting a bit lucky with scouting. Since these civics are too important to delay, we'll end up having to hard tech them on occasion. Here's a helpful infographic that contains all of the techs and civics that can be worth grabbing in the first 45 turns or so of a typical online speed game. Techs and civics highlighted in green are ones with the Eurekas we should always trigger. Ones in yellow are those with the Eurekas we should trigger whenever it's convenient, and ones in red are those that are so strongly in conflict with optimal play that we rarely ever boost them. You may be surprised by how many relatively easily achieved Eurekas are marked in yellow, horseback riding and irrigation, for instance. It's simply a matter of it being hard to fit many builders into the optimal early game build orders, with the builders we do produce prioritizing luxury resources over farmable and pasturable resources. Furthermore, beyond getting our districts unlocked, progress through the tech tree is relatively unimportant early on if we're not at war. On the other hand, making fast progress through the civics tree is extremely important early on. It's just that many of these Eureka conditions are generally completely unreasonable. If you're ever triggering their inspiration for games and recreation, you need to reevaluate your entire build order. Once we eventually reach the feudalism civic and can start pumping out a bunch of 5-charge builders with impunity using the serfdom policy card, hitting Eurekas and inspirations starts to become far easier. After wrapping up our early game development and settler production, we finally have the spare production needed to chase after every Eureka we can get our hands on. There are some handy tricks that can make doing this easier and more efficient. For instance, the inspiration for mercenaries, own 8 land military units, can be triggered by levying a city-state. Units obtained through levying also count towards other Eurekas, such as machineries own 3 archers. Furthermore, by producing just 3 archers, 3 melee units, and 2 siege units, and then upgrading them as necessary, we'll trigger the Eurekas for machinery, metal casting, scorched earth, replaceable parts, siege tactics, and even mobilization. These units can then be garrisoned in our cities to provide value from the retainer's policy card, giving +1 amenity to each city. While most Eurekas are easy, such as building an aqueduct, an armory, and a lumber mill, there are also some Eurekas that can be extremely difficult to trigger naturally. Square rigging, military science, and radio, to name a few. However, there are a number of ways of obtaining these Eurekas without fulfilling their associated objectives. Civ bonuses that grant free random Eurekas, such as China's, great people that grant random free Eurekas, such as Leonardo da Vinci, and the effect of the Great Library, which provides a random free Eureka every time any other civilization recruits a great scientist. You may be wondering, if these boosts are random, how are we supposed to ensure that they give us the most difficult and therefore valuable Eurekas? Well, that's simple. You just have to eliminate all of the other possibilities. Take this game, for instance. We have the great scientist Dmitry Mendeleev, who grants us a free random Eureka from the industrial era. In order to ensure that he gives us the military science boost, which is the hardest to obtain of the remaining industrial era Eurekas for us, we have him idle for a few turns while we finish triggering every other Eureka first, such as building 2 forts for the ballistics boost. Afterwards, this scientist is guaranteed to award us with the military science Eureka, maximizing the value we get out of him. Through careful utilization of all of these tips and tricks, you can maximize the pace you'll be able to set through the tech and civics tree. If you want to see more tips and tricks like this, be sure to check out my playlist, which contains a ton of guides based around multiplayer Civ 6 with a better balanced game mod. I also recommend following me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Herson100. Roughly 24 hours after this video is posted, I'll be streaming the CPL Free-For-All Season 2 finale, where the top 10 Free-For-All Civ 6 players will be competing in a head-to-head showdown, and you won't want to miss it. That's all for now. Herson signing out.